how is it when you have the kinds of reports, which I will say later on, I'm not going to go into it now, but I'll just say you have headlines like the central bank saying people are living paycheck to paycheck. You have Martin Daly saying the curse of cocaine. These are articles in the newspapers. You had the Doma president. Well, he didn't say we're on the verge of anarchy, but he more or less indicated that. And you had another article talking about restaurants. I'm talking about just headlines in the papers, nothing from central bank itself or in detail. And restaurants closing down because they simply don't have the customers. So all of those things, except cars, seem to be on the He's laughing. Seem to be on the downswing. So I turn it over to you to give me, as I say, the maths not mathsing.
Just,
yeah, Roddy, maths not mathsing.
Maths not mathsing. Just before you begin, Darius, lovely to meet you. It's online, but I certainly know your work for the long time that you've been writing, and we have some common friends and so on. And when I was doing the research, asking myself, how did Darius Figeura get to this? Something that triggered in my mind was to ask you, is there something that happened in your life that triggered you to study illegal drugs?
Thank you, Ms. Denning. You have proven true to form the Ms. Demming I have known over the years.
Oh, damn me. I feel like the outsider here.
Important and to the point. Let me answer that. My research into the illicit economy of the Caribbean is a life study. In 1969, I was 14 years old attending Belmont Intermediate. And I actually witnessed firsthand, whilst being a student in Belmont, my schoolmates began the process of using illicit drugs. It was mandrax and it was Colombian compressed marijuana, all being imported from Colombia and flooding Trinidad and Tobago. At the same time, we were in the streets shouting power. And the entire society was literally becoming unglued at its core because the old colonial discourse was under assault. I was part of that. So I asked myself at 14 years old, was this simply coincidence? That whilst we are questioning our worldview and what puts us together as an independent nation, you unleash upon us a barrage of illicit drugs that now creates a drug culture, illicit drug culture in Trinidad and Tobago that is targeting urban east-west corridor youths, predominantly African and mixed race people. So that is when my study started. I only started writing in the 90s, the second half of the decade of the 90s, because at that time I determined it was time for me to write and to publish. Because what I had collected over the years, that is why early o'clock, 1979, I went back to UWI to do an MSc in criminology. And I remember well writing a paper on the ganja trade of Trinidad and Tobago at that time, handed it to the gentleman who introduced me to criminology, Dr. Ken Price. And it was like revelation to him because I was doing field work, speaking to people who were in the business. So that is how long I'm in this thing. So I have watched this illicit economy in Trinidad and Tobago go through 4 stages of evolution. We are now presently in the 4th stage of its evolution. So as the business model evolves, it impacts Trinidad and Tobago. So what went on in Trinidad and Tobago in the second half of the decade of the 90s, which was our roaring cocaine years, what we are having now presently in the Caribbean is a roaring cocaine trade to Europe, which dwarfs what went on in the decade of the 1990s. So the threat of cocaine and synthetic drugs to Trinidad and Tobago today is more potent than what it was in the 1990s. So this thing is not going away. We continue to play mamby-pamby with it and to play around with it, and we continue to be a nation in delusion, because this is not denial, this is delusion. This is deliberately deluding yourself to believe that that reality you manufacture every day is real, when all it is a political instrument.
But
So the threat in 2024 is graver.
let me stop you just a little bit, please, because I mean you're making some very strong statements, and whilst I share, perhaps may share many of your views, and maybe I like to. Well, let me just start with this. In 1995, we had the Scott drug report, and I don't know how come I just go online. I thought you couldn't get that report, but it is the easiest thing to get. And when you read that report, it is, I mean, whether or not, no, it's just a commission, it was a report. So no, and in fact, at the end of the day, the whole Dolce, the gang of them were hung. We know that is what the outcome, and they talked about a set of names and so on, which I'm not going to call. But what I'm saying is it's clear that the cocaine trade was thriving in 1995. But what I am gathering, this is where Mr. Figeura, Darius, and please call me Karen, this is what I'm really asking you. I get the impression, I'm talking at it from a socioeconomic position, maybe I'm talking more from the economy in the broader context, that what we're seeing today is not, I mean, marijuana, you go Colorado, it's on the stock exchange there, you could buy CBC, I mean, marijuana has been decriminalized, it's almost, that whole, it's a different conversation about marijuana. What I'm really asking about is in today, where we are seeing the proliferation of gangs. I had a study that I got some figures where they said the gang numbers had grown from 90 something to 100 and something within a matter of years. That's from the police themselves. Proliferation of gangs, unlicensed guns, which are primarily responsible for murders in this country. And there are studies, I looked at 2 studies. Now, other studies said the opposite, and they're not, and they are not yours. Other studies said the opposite, which said that the drug trade is really a transshipment, meaning that they don't really, it's not so much of cocaine use in Trinidad as much. Yes, some people are on the drugs, yes, but it's mostly transshipping it to Europe and to America. And the guns are the issue, which is a corollary and not the causative factor in the crime in Trinidad. In other words, they say it is not the drug trade itself, because they say the transshipment of drugs, I'm just telling you what 2 studies said. The transshipment of drugs goes around very nicely and very quietly and so on. But it is, what is the corollary to that is the importation of guns and gangs. So I want you to explain, if you can, you gave a kind of a background to it. I want to explain what is the relationship with the guns if most of the drugs do not stay here, but they transshipped, but the guns stay in Trinidad. And that the proliferation of gangs, what is their core business? What is their business then if the drugs are not in the country? What is their business? Which to the murders in this country.
From the time the first illicit shipments started rolling in via pirogues onto the shores of Trinidad and Tobago, gangland was created to serve the illicit drug trade in Trinidad and Tobago. So if we had the time to talk, I could give you a history of gangland Trinidad created by cocaine, you know.
But give us a shorter version.
Darius, just before you begin that history of ganglands, I want you to go back to, you talked about in 1969 when you were going to school, and that was the first time that you saw your colleagues using drugs, and that is what inspired you or motivated you to do the writings. But you also talked about the business model. How has
Yes,
the business model changed
yes.
1969 to now? Tell me about that. I don't understand business models.
And when you ask that, Denise, you can't divorce it from the crime, the murders, most of which are committed with unlicensed guns by gangs. So they're all tied up in one knot. I want to know, I want an explanation for
No,
that.
well, that will flow in answering both queries
Right.
that you all have. Because remember, it's organic. So to explain an organic function, you simply unravel it like a single line of skin in a sweater. So let's unravel. The first business model that brought the products to Trinidad was the Medellin Federation. That was then replaced by Cali Federation. Both of them carried on the same business model, horizontally integrated. So they grew their product, they processed their product into the end product, they control its movement, and at the retail end in the consuming nations of the North, they control the retailing. So they control their product from production to sale. The third evolution, that change. The Colombians started to wholesale their cocaine. They no longer controlled it from production to retail. They became wholesalers of cocaine and transporters of cocaine. And that was in the decade of the 1990s. And that is when the business model in Trinidad and Tobago changed, because that is when persons living in Trinidad and Tobago and the rest of the Caribbean now began to purchase ton loads and less than ton loads of cocaine from the Colombians, and then hire the Colombians to transport it to the North Atlantic, where their people will collect it in America and then sell it, either wholesale it or pass it on to retail networks. And that is when we started to get in Trinidad and Tobago and the rest of the Caribbean, a Caribbean phenomenon being created of Caribbean people who were drug traffickers in their own right, who then became members of the Caribbean oligarchy. So when you look at Barbados, Jamaica, Haiti, Trinidad and Tobago, Guyana, you find all the oligarchs who are drug trafficking families, and they are wielding immense political and economic power. That is what the third evolutionary stage of the drug trade brought to the Caribbean. And when the Colombians gave up horizontal control of their market, that is when they introduced into the Caribbean the gun trade and human smuggling, because they had now to maximize wealth generation. So just as how they flooded us with dope and made us into crackheads, they then began to flood us with cheap guns. And the boats will leave Colombia loaded with weaponry, including bulletproof vests, Kevlar helmets, RPG, whatever you want and you have the money to pay, they brought it to you. And they dealt through brokers in the Caribbean. And they flooded the Caribbean with their gunboats. So you see, these tourists, massa tourists, who feel they know our history and our reality better than us who live in it, I laugh at them. That is what's flooded the Caribbean with guns.
Well, I will say this. I will say this because you make some very definitive statements, huh? But I will say in support because I have to, Denise and I both have to keep you are presenting a position, and we have to. What is it? I'm struggling for the word.
We
But
have to
in
make
any case, to
sure
support
that
what you're saying, to support what you're saying, we had, and I've used it many, many times, when Dana Sitahal was murdered in 2014, Mr. Brownfield, who was U.S. Secretary of State, Assistant Secretary for International Narcotics, he is quoted in the Guardian, Trinidad Guardian, actually, because I got it from the Trinidad Guardian. He is quoted as saying that essentially that the assassination of a leading attorney in Trinidad and Tobago was orchestrated by a transnational drug organization with a presence in Trinidad and Tobago. Speaking via teleconference from Washington, he said there's a high level of organized crime in Trinidad and Tobago. On June 24th, I think of 2014 again, he said this was a carefully planned operation and orchestrated not by an orchestrated by an international criminal organization. He went on to say that he said that he went on to say, yeah, so he went on to say that he said that there was no question of them stealing her pocketbook. So you're not going to get the Mr. Brownfield, who is the deputy assistant secretary on narcotics for United States, making such a strong statement. So we have an outsider, so to speak, an independent voice, so to speak, and an independent voice that would be a subject matter expert, no question about it, telling us very, very clearly that there is in this country a transnational drug organization operating here, and that they were responsible for the murder of Tina Sita. He is on record. I didn't say it, and I didn't. It was in the newspapers, and he said, and on the second time he spoke, he said, "I am not speaking on it again." So much of what you have said is borne out by that. Secondly, to support what you're also saying independently as it can be, Martin Joseph, when he was Minister of National Security, trying to explain, God rest his soul, trying to explain the phenomenon of the drugs and the guns in Trinidad. And he said a lot of those guns, this is in Parliament, it's in the Hansard, a lot of the guns that were flooding Trinidad and Tobago were guns coming out of Venezuela because they were changing all their guns. And there was a drug for guns trade going on also. So he related the guns and the drugs as part and parcel of a organized narcotics trade, I guess worth billions of dollars in our little island. So we have two sources. One, I think you take Mr. Brownfield, you can't dismiss him at all. So it gives credence to what you're saying. But what I thought, and you can correct me, and Denise, please jump in here. I was more of the view that whilst we have people in Trinidad who are drug addicts, I mean cocaine, not the marijuana, the cocaine. According to what's his name, the Calypsonian, David Rudder, they say they get in the coke, they get in the marijuana by letting the cocaine pass. So we know about that song, and Martin Daly quoted that in his article called "The Curse of Cocaine." That's one of the quotations, right? I don't get the impression, I might be wrong, that we have as much drug addicts in Trinidad as much as gangs involved in the business of the drug trade, transshipment trade, and protecting their territory as much as people in Trinidad getting hooked on cocaine. I don't know if I have it wrong.
Cocaine is a sunset drug in Trinidad and Tobago. And
Meaning?
that is why the Ford business model believes in synthetic drugs. And that is why the problem we have in Trinidad now is synthetic drugs. There is an alarming prevalence of a switch in Trinidad and Tobago now for people to use synthetic drugs.
From
Just as in
where?
1969, they
From
were
where?
using mandrax. It is now back.
From where? Where are they getting it? From what country?
But synthetic drugs, the reason why the Mexican business model loves synthetic drugs, you make it right here.
Oh,
You
Lord.
just get the precursors, and right in a little kitchen, you make your synthetic drugs. And then you just take all the noxious, poisonous waste and you dump it in the Caribbean. That is the reality of the business.
So
Already.
Darius, you're saying that the business model has transformed and it has moved from originally being marijuana and, as you said, mandrax and stuff like that, which um, I could. Here's my
You're
story on.
not attesting to it. You can understand.
No, here's my story on this. I
Mhm.
grew up in East Dry River.
Mm-hmm.
And in the 1970s, when I was going to school, I was going to Holy Name. All of the children, not all, but the majority of the children around me started smoking marijuana. And they
Mm-hmm.
moved from being highly active to everybody now chilling. And I didn't understand that until many years later when my brother told me what was happening. Because I don't understand how people we used to like to run in the road and we used to like to go to the savannah and so on. And all of a sudden, people are not interested in that. They're chilling on the corner. So that you have described a transition from that to the transition of using cocaine, and you're saying
Mm-hmm.
we're into synthetic drugs. And you're saying that all we have to do is to bring in the ingredients and make the synthetic drugs here. So
Yes.
how is that impacting the transshipment?
That's what I want to know. Because you
You
can't,
see,
I don't believe that has died down at all. No,
no, you see, in order for you to understand what is happening today, you have to understand the fourth evolutionary stage. And the fourth evolutionary stage is created by the Mexican business model. Now remember, when cocaine became the drug of choice, Mexicans were present. From that time, there were Mexicans at the core of the Medellin and Cali federations. In fact, Mexicans ran the Medellin and Cali Federation. They were always there. So what has happened now is that the Mexicans have now seized control. They have literally pushed the Colombians aside, and they are now controlling the markets of the North Atlantic. And the Colombians are playing catch up. And that leads to a lot of violence. Sounds familiar? Ring your ears. That leads.
Another ring of ears, You know
No,
what?
that contributes to a lot of violence. And we are seeing the violence now breaking out and spreading in Europe. Right now, Holland is like Bombersville,
Yeah.
because that is
Oregon,
drug-related violence in Europe. You see? So when you understand the fourth incarnation of the business model, and you understand it is the most dangerous and intractable illicit model ever unleashed on us in the Caribbean. And it is going to shake us to our core. Even worse, if you follow closely the Caribbean murder rates per annum, what you notice for the Caribbean murder rates for last year is that all Colombian island transshipment points that went dead, that were simply relegated to silence, have suddenly now awoken. And the violence has returned, and I'm speaking specifically now of St. Kitts Nevis. The violence has returned to St. Kitts Nevis from the good old days of Lil Nut, who brought it to St. Kitts. And then they took him away in chains to America. It went dormant. Now it has suddenly reappeared because there is tons and tons of cocaine to move through the Caribbean to Europe.
But this is Denise. I
No,
mean, help me here.
my question here is,
For
what are the
Trinidad,
implications for Trinidad?
what
What
is
we
the
must
main? What is the main?
what we must understand for
Darius,
Trinidad and Tobago
Darius.
in
What
the
what
in
I'm getting concerned about, or what I am not following. Maybe our listeners are better following this than I am. But to me, it seems to me, I'm not excluding what you've said, the reemergence of the synthetic drugs, because Oregon has a huge problem. A family friend went to Oregon, which is supposed to be a very Republican state, very upscale and everything, and they have a huge problem. I mean, it's all over America now with this allowing people, and it is exactly the synthetic drugs that are really causing the problem in the United States, I imagine in Europe. But what I am focusing on is us, Trinidad and Tobago. Are you saying, and this is what I want to be clear that you are you saying that the transshipment of cocaine, whether it's from whichever Latin American country it is, has has dissipated, has gone on the decline?
no
Uh,
no. If I am saying that there is more tonnage to move through the Caribbean,
yeah.
Trinidad cannot be relegated. Look at the economies of the Caribbean, and Trinidad and Tobago is number one. So
But
would
which,
you leave this economy unscathed and go to look to transship from St. Kitts? All those bulk carriers that we have leaving Trinidad to go to Europe, all those bulk carriers from the gas sector, what are you targeting to tote besides bulk carrier? So I could get down in
I
the,
don't want
So
you to get
Darius,
down
Darius,
without
here's my concern. You've just made a statement that a
yeah.
lot of our bulk carriers that are carrying our natural gas, because we're not exporting oil anymore. So those that are carrying our natural gas,
We are.
that it is likely that they are also carrying.
these people are acute business people. These people, and I'm speaking now of the Mexican model, these people practice annual planning. They have sent all their children to the best business schools in the North Atlantic. They
Very,
run this thing as a well-oiled corporation.
But
very well.
Darius, you haven't answered my question. Are
So
you saying
when you look at Trinidad and Tobago, you note and mark and target all of the means that Trinidad and Tobago's economy provides in order for you to exploit the transship? It's a business you are in. So you're not going to say, I am not going to penetrate and use nothing. I could, since the first book I put out on the drug trade, I have listed instances where loads have been found on carriers.
That is
That is
true.
nothing new.
It is true. I think I recall about 2 years ago, tanker was let me not say a tanker, a large ship. Because I want to, be careful in my language, but it was about to leave the other port, not the port, it's been the other one, the
Point
big port,
Lisas? Oh,
Point
Point
Lisas.
Lisas. Yes.
And the captain was from Spain. Now they are under international law, and I think the ship would have been registered under, not under our laws, but under whatever country, whoever flag they were flying. And as he was about to leave, according to the newspapers, as he was about to depart, checking around the ship in the back by the propeller, tied to the back of the propeller, was a huge amount of cocaine. And when he saw it, he had immediately reported it, which he had to because he didn't get in trouble himself, for not reporting it, I mean. He immediately reported it to our customs and our police. So that is a one instance. More recently, we've had a lot of cocaine being washed up on these off of Mearu. Recently, there was some oil spillage issue of some barge that was supposed to go from to Guyana. Somehow it came off the radar and apparently it went into Venezuela for some reason. But the point is that it was said how it is that, I mean, again, the Guardian reported it. The Guardian reported it, said that these occurrences were very regular of these boats coming, bringing fuel, and bringing it to Guyana, and yet they are in our waters because they were in our waters. And where were our marine interceptors? Because what also washed up, coincidentally, I'm saying, coincidentally, was a whole set of cocaine.
Well,
They have had nothing to do with each other, but it sure sounded very
yeah,
coincidental.
well, so let me explain the business model and how it is impacting Trinidad. What you must understand with the Mexican model, when they move into our country and they accept and embrace affiliates from gangland, the business policy is that their affiliates in Trinidad and Tobago must maximize the generation of wealth. So you're not only going to become a drug trafficker in your own right, but you have to develop the local market. So don't believe that you are going to.
Why do you have to do that?
Because that is the way you're going to maximize your wealth generation. Why you must, this little boxes Massa likes to create and all of we feel that reality. I don't deal with Massa. So what is happening? Massa wants us to believe that the cocaine comes surgically prepped and it just leaves without impacting Trinidad and Tobago and oh la-di-da and la-di-da and la-di-da. So the business model is insistent to them, you have to be earners. And one way you have to be earners,
invested in it.
you have to generate wealth locally. So that means any and every form of generating wealth, you have to get involved in it.
So what does that mean? So be more specific. So you mean you have to start selling it here?
So you have to expand the menu of illicit products you will offer for sale. You have to now become involved in licit businesses where the money will be invested in. I will not call what are the ideal licit businesses that they love, or they will feel it with time, but it starts already.
We have a good idea. I mean,
Yeah.
look at poker. No, you don't have to. You don't even have to not say it, because when they passed the Proceeds of Crime Act, what they did is, because the what's it, the umbrella organization, and then they had the Caribbean version of it, which is why we were pressed into passing the Financial Intelligence Unit, because they said we were non-compliant. They listed the businesses which are used as vehicles for money laundering. I'm not talking about persons, I'm talking about businesses. And the businesses were the jewelers, lawyers, the real estate persons in the real estate business. I know those three are correct. I know those three are absolutely correct, because I remembered it very clearly that they had to list the businesses that are used as mechanisms for the laundering of illicit monies coming out from the drug trade. And they are under scrutiny. They're supposed to be under some level of scrutiny. So, you could name some of them. Poker has a whole list of.
They even start a call yet.
Yes, but no, they had about 10 or 11. I didn't start to call because
that is short of a length. So what is happening? So that is why we now have the marketing, the heavy pressing marketing of synthetic drugs, because that's the growth sector. Cocaine is a sunset drug. So they are now presenting you with a menu of sunrise drugs. And they have all sorts of other items for sale.
Darius,
Fake goods,
Yeah,
fake
let me ask you one
pharmaceuticals.
thing. I have something I want to
Darius,
ask
tell me
after.
something. What is a sunset drug?
Yeah.
A sunset drug is a drug that has run its course of time, and the buyers are now getting older and older. New buyers are not coming to you for it to start a journey with it. It's a sunset drug. It's cocaine then. Powdered cocaine crack. It's dead. It has been around so long, people not into it.
But
So what they do is that they constantly have to bring out new products to get new addicts.
Darius, you contradict yourself, because you're saying that the transshipment of cocaine is more than alive and well.
That's
What I think
Colombian.
you're saying, what I think you're saying is that it may be eventually overtaken, but it is not dead. Far from dead.
Dead. What
It's
you
not
must
dead.
understand is two business models you need to speak from.
Right.
The Colombians are stuck with tons and tons of cocaine right now in Colombia. The coca bush is rotting on the ground, because if you turn all the coca bush into coca paste and then into cocaine hydrochloride, it have no market for it, because fentanyl has destroyed the American cocaine market. And who controls fentanyl into America? The Mexican business model.
Okay, but let me.
You understand the significance of that?
Okay, one thing I will say.
The Mexicans,
in terms of the significance of that.
the Mexicans,
what I'm interested in now is Trinidad and Tobago still being a transshipment point. So it's no longer cocaine. So what is it? Are we this transshipment?
I can't believe you're not just
No,
point for cocaine.
It's cocaine.
But this is what we're trying to get.
It's cocaine, and it's synthetic drugs.
Okay, all right. So we have two of them living.
Because remember, the main volume of cocaine coming through Trinidad and Tobago to Europe is Colombian.
Okay, let me just say something to support what you're saying, or we not support. I mean, not use with support. That gives that gives some level of credibility to what you said about Massa. When I started laughing, I was not laughing really. I was not laughing really, because it is the fact is that is already a sad thing that along the urban community, and you say the Afro Trinidad, but I take great, not to what you said, not to you, but I take great offense to people who make it about race, because I say to them, until recently, Tobago had no drugs and the population is about 95% Afro. But it is a rural community, and many of the crimes that are committed in Tobago have Trinidad connections. If you go into places like Toco, and
No. What you are saying about Tobago is totally wrong. Tobago floats on dope.
No, I said until recently.
Since the decade of the 1990s, Tobago was integrated into the cocaine trade.
Okay.
Full blown.
All right. Murders, the murder rate, which is an indication of gang activity, the 6s and the 7s, which is all up in St. Lucia and all over the place. It's what you got out of Tobago, whether it was used as a transshipment point, because maybe that gives credibility to the argument that the transshipment is very peaceful. Is the gang?
No.
Guns that make it into murder and so on. Because
before the so-called violence hit Tobago, there were people being murdered in Tobago who were connected to the trade.
How many?
There were always cocaine murders in Tobago from the decade of the 90s.
Give me statistics on that.
But nobody was never interested in it because Tobago wasn't talking about 10 murders for the year and thing. But amongst the murders in Tobago, there were key
That's a different
traffickers.
point. That's a different point.
There were
And
key
see,
drug traffickers who were killed.
yes, but that's not numbers. That's not numbers. And the
The
reason I'm
issue with the game is not numbers. The issue is who you killed.
well,
And the reason why the violence has not broken out in Tobago is that there is a feeding frenzy. Persons who were not in the game in Tobago before are running Tobago to share in
and
the
many of
wealth.
them are from coming from Trinidad. Because when you read about the murders in Tobago, many times the persons who committed murders came over from Trinidad.
No,
And
no, no, no. In the 1980s, in the
wow,
1980s,
wow,
when the NER was ruling, the process had already started in Tobago, where Tobago persons living in Trinidad, born in Trinidad, but of Tobago origin, was leaving Trinidad and hiding Tobago because there are warrants on them.
because they got corrupted in Trinidad.
Right? They started hiding out in Tobago, and it became an industry in Tobago for people with warrants or people looking to kill them to go and hide in Tobago since the 80s.
Okay. Denise, you wanted? Oh, I want to ask something afterwards. Denise? You-
So,
Darius, what you're saying is so frightening, eh? Absolutely frightening. Because you're saying that historically, and you're going back to the 90s to say that we've had people killed
yeah,
because of their involvement in the drug trade.
yes,
Saying that right now, the drug trade is so well organized that it is not just transshipment. It is that what is your business model? Here, you bring in
yes,
yeah, but yeah,
you
yeah.
bring in
That's
drugs, you have a manufacturing sector. You have to ask yourself what is the marketing strategy you have, and you also have to have a mechanism for the money to be legalized.
thank you. Most important.
And those three things to me, you're almost describing, well, you are describing a business model, but that sounds like a normal
narco
business
trade.
model to me.
How much
Yes.
money is in that? How much money is in? How much what kind of money we talking about? Because I wanted to ask you something, Denise, from what you're saying. I just wanted to say something that supports Darius. Listen, this is just to be clear. In terms of when we speak about crime, and I had some statistics, the crime numbers started to jump from 2000. So while the drugs were there and all that was going on, you're not seeing a level of murders and gangs and guns on the street as we see today. No question about that. Even if Tobago was in it since 1960, you were not seeing it. There were no murders, or there were no reported murders, and there was no gang activity. What I am hearing today is this, and so it come back to your master, master, you didn't say master, but a master comment. What I understand, and I want to know if there's any credibility in it. What they're saying is that originally, and this is also from my readings, um, along the urban east-west corridor was recruitment. That's where we did the recruiting. And it still is there is the major recruitment point for a number of reasons. And what has happened among those gangs, which have proliferated in the last 2 years, is that they no longer are doing the work of massa, whoever is the big boy who really bringing in the drugs, but they themselves are operating separate and apart from those who used to be in control, and they are now, in a sense, are deemed to be a threat to the established order of business of a well-oiled business in this country, where the business was controlled by a certain group of persons, whoever they may be, who control the gangs and whose job it was is to be the supervisors and to do the recruiting. And now you're getting gangs operating separate and apart running their own show and not taking instructions from anyone, but they running their own show. Is there any truth to that?
That is just that is just delusion.
That's not true. Oh,
That have no foundation in reality on the ground. So let me give you all a understanding of this thing about called everybody like to talk about gang.
but they have plenty gangs.
What gang is have?
Sixes and
No.
sevens.
With all the trade and the overlords of the trade, as we say, the capo and the don. It have no gang. They created the capo and the don created the gang. Let me tell you something. In 2008, for the first time in the history of Trinidad and Tobago, the murder toll peaked.
538.
Right? It crossed 500 for the first time in our
538. That was the minister then. That was the
Right.
highest until Mr. What's his name? Our second. Don't get bad, Mr. Griffith. But in 2019, you had the second highest until last year.
and but what
19.
was the difference between 2008 and thereafter and from
Yeah.
2017?
What was the difference?
The vast difference is that 2008 peaked, but from 2009 go down the road, it just fell dramatically.
Why?
And the fundamental reason why that peak
Uh-huh.
was because of the collapse of the Valley Norte cartel, the Valley Norte Federation in Colombia.
You're not
Who
afraid of
was-
these
Who
people?
She's asking.
I done dead already. I'm 69 years old.
but neither Denise nor I want to give our age, but I ain't dead yet either.
Yeah, so the fact of the matter is the Valley Norte cartel was dismantled. It had collapsed. And the
And where-
paramilitary
where-
organization,
where-
the Colombian paramilitaries were now taking over. But they did not change it.
Where are they from? Valley Norte. How come you didn't mention Venezuela?
Well, Venezuela is a transshipment point. Venezuela is a figment of mass imagination.
It is a transshipment point, though.
Everything that brought, they always talk about Venezuela, but everything passes through Venezuela from
nobody
other
ever thinks
places.
they're growing marijuana. Nobody say they making cocaine in Venezuela, you know. They say they making the cocaine in Colombia, but it passing through Venezuela to come down this way to go to America and Europe.
Yeah, but they don't pass through Venezuela again because all the cocaine that leaving now is either Brazil or Ecuador. It's either Brazil or Ecuador. It don't go through Venezuela again.
Darius, come back to
Yes.
my head. No, I want you to describe the Valley Norte.
Yes. So the Valley Norte Federation was the federation that said we will wholesale. We are no longer like Medellin and Cali, who believe in horizontal
What country is
integration.
that?
Colombia.
Oh, Colombia.
So Valley Norte fell apart, as usual, fighting among yourself.
Yeah.
The Colombian paramilitary organizations replaced them, but they kept the same model.
Mm-hmm.
So what happened in Trinidad and Tobago for the 2008 peak and the peace that subsequently spread in Trinidad is that there was a changing of the guard in Trinidad. The capos and the dons were replaced. The paramilitary capos and dons were getting rid of the Valley Norte dons. And that caused the violence in Trinidad with our gangland. Because they had two Colombian organizations going at each other. And that is why it peaked and died thereafter. The question now,
Before you
why?
ask the question, here's what I want to know. You describe them as paramilitary.
Yeah, FARC is, you know.
No, the Colombian paramilitary organizations
It's not FARC.
were cocaine traffickers posing as far-right political militias serving the oligarchs of Colombia, killing poor people as usual.
Okay.
So who is FARC then?
FARC was supposed to be a revolutionary group to bring a revolution to Colombia, but they became drug traffickers.
Right, and weren't they doing business with Venezuela? And
Everybody moved their product to Venezuela because
right,
Venezuela
and then
was available for a price.
to reach down to America, and they'd have to go down.
No, the main pipeline to America was to leave Colombia or they will land the planes in Venezuela, load it up with Colombian cocaine in Colombia or Venezuela, fly to Central America, and then from Central America put it in America, because then you put it in the semi-submersibles and the boats and get in America through Mexico. That was the main pipeline.
And that was broken according to the study that I got from the United States. They said the Isthmus, when they were passing the drugs through Central America, they were able to successfully break that connection, which is why the transshipment became the preferred vehicle for the movement of drugs.
Break what connection? Break what connection? When the CIA was taking the same dope that comes to
I don't know about that.
And dumping it among the African population in LA, in South Central. The biggest dope dealers in South Central LA among the African population was the CIA.
Okay, but let me just say to you this.
So,
I am not an American.
No, that is documented by declassified files. Everything I speak.
No, we're not saying.
I have my backup here.
I'm not saying that, this is how I started asking you. This is my concern. I would like to think Denise has the same concern, and the people who are listening have the same concern. At the end of the day, as selfish as it is, you see what is going on around the world, which I'm not going to give the examples. I mean, they read it seeing it on TV all the time. Every country charity begins at home. And what I am asking you, and this is how the whole conversation started, is there really a dual economy in Trinidad? That is, and because how can you explain?
No, well, I have to answer Ms. Demming, Ms. Demming position, and then I will come now to debunk this whole talk about dual economy. Because in the Caribbean, cocaine is the economy. So, yes, Ms. Demming. So,
in Trinidad?
So what is happening?
Oh God, I am going too far, boy.
So we have the new Don on the block, the new capo, the new Don. In 90,
we talk about Trinidad. I do not want to hear about
Trinidad. I'm talking about because so 2008 a base, 2009, 10 is a base. But what we must understand, the first indigenous Dons that grew out of gangland in Trinidad appeared in the second half of the 1990s. In fact, when the UNC came into power, they were already there. When Basilio became prime minister, they were already there. And they were created by the Colombian business model. They were in the trade. They were not created by government, quote unquote, contracts. They were not created by.
We know it is not.
They were not created by herb and CPEP and painting building behind the bridge.
And we know that.
That was just the politicians trying to drag them into a web of patronage to control them, because they had more control on the ground than the politicians.
So the politicians were not part of that.
In the second half of the 1990s, the Dons have appeared.
So the politicians were not part of that then. The politicians have fought against that then.
The politicians didn't even have a clue. Didn't even have a clue what was going on. So what is happening from from the time those Dons appeared, and I could tell you all, amongst those Dons, there appeared in Trinidad and Tobago an individual of unique capabilities and capacity.
Whose name shall remain whose name you shall
But
not call.
I can afford to call his name because
Why that?
it is with respect.
Oh, okay then. Well, I wonder what you mean by respect. But anyhow,
No, but you can respect the prowess of a gunslinger.
look, you don't get us in trouble. That is the
So what is happening now? So that is the caliber of the operators that appeared. So that changed gangland immediately.
one capo.
Because now you have a series of dons who are all heavily integrated into the trade. And amongst them, you have capable, competent, transnational traffickers. So you know they had to die, right? So what is happening?
By natural causes, you mean, right?
By unnatural causes. So
Oh, what happens?
so the business model is now creating a new dimension where those who are supposed to be hewers of wood and haulers of water are now players. So now we move to get into the economy, right? So just as that same business model created those drug trafficking families of the Caribbean who entered the oligarchy of the Caribbean, it also created dons, indigenous Caribbean dons.
When you say dons, what do you mean by that? You mean more? Because I know that's a mafia terminology. So,
I know mafia terminology.
that's okay. You corrected me already. So
Yeah, the way we use it on the streets, like don and capo, it has a different meaning.
what does it mean?
When you are a don, it's that you are a player of command. You command a militia.
Yeah.
You command a business model.
Yeah.
You have all your members of that business model. You have your product. You have your traffickers. You have those who move it. You have the people. You have the money. You have your washers of your money. You have everything. You have the people who handle your investments. So in other words, it's an illicit business model that has now reached down to the street. It is an illicit business model that is now taking hewers of wood and drawers of water and turning them into players. So what developed?
What does that mean for Trinidad and Tobago then in our socio-economic development?
No, what happens is that is how gangland changed dramatically forever. Because that is when in the era of the 1990s, the second half of that era, as the dons appeared, you also had players appearing.
Okay, what's
so
the difference?
Amongst those persons in gangland who did not have the connection of a don by which to run the business model and from which they will feed, they now have to align themselves to players. Because from players you get your product, and you get all your contacts, and you get your impunity, and you get whatever you want. So that is how gangland evolved rapidly from the second half of the 1990s to now.
But it seemed to have exploded. What do you say, Dennise? I mean, in terms of I had a quotation that I had gotten from the newspaper giving me actually the data from the Trinidad Police Service and saying how they had 97 gangs. Let me see if I can read it. Anyway, they had 97 gangs, but they had in a matter of years, it had grown to over 100 and something, a significant amount. So what does that mean for us then as an socio-economic development?
Yeah, but how you got that figure? Did you do a census? Did you walk up to them and say, are you a gang man?
I rely on but listen, I'm not working CSO,
No, but I don't rely on it at all because I want to know how you arrive at that.
So
But
what you rely on?
Darius, how do you arrive at the data that
Yeah,
you are
how you rely on your data then?
Fieldwork.
field work?
Hmm.
So it means that when you go out into the field, you're actually interacting with this whole population of people who are involved in illicit drugs.
For years, I have done fieldwork.
All right. And you have interacted with people who are involved in illicit drugs.
Yes.
Okay. That's excellent. That's excellent. So just now, if you had to just give us an idea of how many gangs there are, what would you suggest?
I I have never tried to add up anything. My role is to understand structure, function, organization, methodology. That's
Lovely.
my work.
That's excellent. Here's what I want to ask you. If you were in charge of Trinidad just for a short time, what would you do to help us to just retransform, reconfigure, reboot our our society so that it is not as difficult as it is now?
No, what I will tell them in the first place, no thanks, I don't want the work.
Yes, you don't want to work. But is there any suggestion you could make?
Because you see, Trinidad is a sick place.
Oh gosh.
No, but what
Trinidad and
you
Tobago is a
say?
sick place.
They bring you as a consultant.
No,
Government
no,
will.
no, 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 no. Nobody ain't giving me no consultancy.
So Darius,
Up
you
to now,
said
you can't even give them a PhD.
okay.
Oh, well, pretend you got a consultant. You could be all asking us. Your listeners are listening, and
And
you're painting a very dire thing because what you're
it,
telling us.
No, I am not here to aid and abet delusion.
yeah,
Oh,
I hear that. I hear that. But what you are saying is that we're likely to continue to go down a road that is going to continue to be worse and get worse and get worse.
Because
And
yes, because what we must understand presently, there is no longer one business model in operation in the illicit trades in Trinidad. There are two,
okay,
and
but
the two business models impact us differently. And
how?
since 2017, the escalation of violence in this country is directly linked to a war between the two business models.
and you're saying that those two business models are externally pushed. They're not
Yes,
local business models. These are business
no, it's
that come.
transnational organized crime.
So Darius, give me some hope now.
If you have a problem that is now intense because it's two models now in operation in your space, and the two models are not compatible. So that is why gangland has fractured, and that is why gangland is in turmoil. That means your entire national security apparatus is not fit for purpose because you are focusing on a problem that do not exist, and you are formulating policies for a reality that exists only in your mind. So the society is not ready and willing to face reality and deal with it. All we into is just talk, 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 and the worst kind of talk. Race babble, race babble, race babble, race babble.
But we're not talking that on this show.
So so what would you look for to suggest that the society is ready to do a
Do
transformation?
something. What is something you have to do?
Well, what has to happen? The transformation has to come from the political, the ruling, and the opposition. The politicians have to lead the transformation. And my God, we done.
All right, let's assume that what you're saying is right, that it has to have a political start. Don't go to focus on who's in the politics now and who and so on. Don't go and focus on that. Let us say that we may get a different political system or the different political scene, what will they do?
Well, the first thing, what is of utmost importance, your TTPS, your customs and excise, your immigration, and your SSA has to be reformed, repurposed, revisioned into organizations that can deal with the threats posed by transnational organized crime in Trinidad and Tobago today. And you have to do that like yesterday.
And the FIU.
But the FIU, in fact,
Yeah, FIU is a critical part of that whole thing.
and the FIU, in fact, is not even fit for purpose for
What
1990.
causes it? So what causes it? What causes it? Since, because I mean, I am familiar with the Revenue Authority. Certainly, we had passed the legislation in the lower house, and then elections call. But I am very well aware that although we may not have said it um, openly, but a large incentive to forming a revenue authority. I think in Barbados has it many years. A lot of other countries have instituted an equivalent of a revenue authority. It's not only because of the hemorrhaging of taxes, people not paying taxes with billions of dollars, not only the issue of the money laundering, but because both Board of Inland Revenue and Customs fall under the Ministry of Finance, therefore it fell under my ministry. The real concern was the level of corruption,
Mhm.
especially at the customs. We even had the United States coming in and helping us to try to deal with how our the issue of clear corruption between the Board of Inland Revenue. I am not calling any others, talk about institutions. And the idea was, and this government has not done it, and it was that they was to set up a special division within the Revenue Authority in which you could not be a member of that particular division, because that was the division that would have all the sensitive information which they would have gotten from the FIU. They would, because you'd have gotten one PIN number. In other words, they would be drug tested, they'd be all the things that they're supposed to have done, get help from the United States to deal not only with the local hemorrhaging of revenue and taxes in the country, but really it was to attack the drug trade. And that is since, well, it was started before I was there, but certainly we are now in 2024 and we still have not seen it happen. My point is this, that many of the things, because Denise has asked you, or what would you recommend? But it's not too hard to recommend some of the things, because if you are saying, I have not heard the argument about the dual economy. This is the first time I heard it expressed. So I have learned something today, that we do have, apparently have within Trinidad and Tobago, the artificial or the mandrax type of drug trade. So I was focusing on the cocaine. But if you have joint select committee meeting and you call the commander, and the commander comes and tells you half of the OPVs are down, they're not working. Of the two hostile ships that they brought, one of them was, they said, according to the report, was deliberately damaged, and the gentleman involved, I think he retired, but they had him go, I don't know, court martial, but let me not say court martial, but they were looking into it as a criminal act. When you have 4 of the 5 scanners in the Port of Spain port supposed to scan when I say drugs, but it's drugs and guns included, coming in and coming out, and only one working is the one United States give us. When you have 19 manual bays and only 3 of them you assign custom officers to do any kind of checking, when the DPP has been begging for staff, that
Mhm.
minimum of 134, and he only has 57 staff, at least I don't know if they increased it since then, but if they did, they would have certainly had it in the papers. When you have a DPP who is significantly understaffed, when you have a gambling legislation, up to now they can't pass it because they can't pass the regulation, so there's still private members club. And the same Minister of Finance in his second speech or first speech said Trinidad and Tobago are the most private members clubs in the world. When you have a legislation that you had to water down to the extent to which that you could not go in there and do a sting operation on them, because if they said they weren't letting you in and you had to go by a magistrate to get permission to go inside, to get inside there, it looks to me that all the things that we're talking about that creating the problems of drugs and crime and violence in this country, we are not doing anything. Or the aircraft, we had these the air guards, or I think all of them resigned, or maybe they might. I think 20 out of the 25 have resigned, and I think 3 more to go. The air guards gone. You had the vessels, half of them down. You're looking at the DPP begging for staff. You have the scanners not working, right? And then you go and buy 18 new cars, and when police cars, and they tell you that half the police cars in different cemeteries all over the country because they're not fit for purpose. And when they bring it back after they use it, not fit for purpose, they put it in according to what they put in the newspaper. I take it from the newspaper. They put it in parts that are substandard. When you have that level, at every level, I could see, when you are at every level, the things that are supposed to be there to sort of protect Trinidad and Tobago, safeguard us against it, you have to wonder, who do we hold responsible for this? If in fact we are right, that there is a dual economy. You said it's not a dual economy. You said there's one economy. There is gas, and there's some gas. You still have some gas. It may not be as much. We supposed to have 4.1. We have 1 point something. But we still have some gas. And I don't think the dragon feel coming through. Mr. Young, don't get vexed with me. But Mr. Biden just said a few days ago that he's reimposing all the sanctions on Venezuela. Okay? All right? And all that Lauren, Manatee, and all of them tie up there. That's why you're keeping quiet about that thing. I wish you the best, but it looked like we're in real trouble in this country. So maybe you are right. We have one economy, not a dual, but one economy.
It's one economy.
Okay, so we do have the gas too. I mean, BPTT and Shell.
Yeah, but remember,
I can't really say that.
Remember, we have the largest economy in the Caribbean because of the gas.
Gas and yes, the gas.
Yes,
and we still have some gas.
No, we don't have nothing because the gas output now has dramatically fallen to the point where we cannot keep the downstream sector.
That is true. That is
going.
True.
So that means it's done. It's finished. It's all over.
Very true. And BPTT sell three other gas fields to Porenco for must be next to nothing, because the price of gas that the minister put at $5 in the last fiscal year is now trading at 160 something. It went to 171 today, but it traded not even half at what, and that is true. And when they're talking about oil, it's 53,000 barrels. And what you could do with that? We imported oil to refine it. So I want to know what our revenue statement going to look like. I want to see what our revenue. No,
everything will look good, because remember
things not looking good. You're borrowing through.
What we must all accept.
Borrow again.
Yeah, what we must all accept is that the politics of race has failed this country.
I don't like to talk that talk. We didn't talk.
It is not fit for purpose.
Right.
I had my phase in the politics of race, and I could tell you,
why we put
politicians in the politics of race are arrogant because they know their re-election does not depend on performance. It has nothing to do with their performance.
So, Darius.
What it depends on then?
What it depends on? Bringing out the tribes.
Oh my Lord!
But Darius,
you don't belong to no tribe then.
No, that is not going to. I don't think that is going to continue. I think, as a matter of fact, that is dropping back.
It
Because when
has,
you
it
talk about
has.
bringing back the tribes, I think you're talking about the Africans and the people of Afro
Uh,
Trinidadian, the Indo Trinidadian, and the
yeah, that is
mixed
it.
Trinidadian is the
They're bigger.
largest increasing race in
Or
the country.
28%.
You know,
You are among them, Darius?
Of course, I'm a breed man.
I
You
would
are
say
among them,
I would
Darius?
say everybody on this screen, each person on this screen is among that mixed breed.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, so
And be
so
proud of it.
don't talk that talk because you remember when Crocro sang that Trinidad will never ever have an Indian prime minister. We had two, a male and a female. So if
So,
Trinidadians only voted on race, then that could never happen because one group is even more dominant numerically than the other. You know who making the decision now? The 28%, and there are many from both other groups who are able to go beyond race and to look at the interest of the country.
yeah, but
That's why
the,
America can have an Obama, and
it,
that's why England can have a
no, it can only, as long as the electorate who is not motivated by race put the finger on the shelf,
Yes.
race will dominate the next outcome.
And
E-
Yeah, go ahead,
I want to
Denise.
suggest, Darius,
He's
that
going to
that
race now.
sector of our population, those persons who, as you describe them, put their finger on the shelf, I want to
Mhm.
suggest that I think they are being activated because the country is difficult and we are all
Mhm.
experiencing difficulties. So
Yeah.
I think there's a higher level of motivation to try and
You
change
think?
things.
You
You know,
think so, Denise? You serious, Denise?
listen. I'm one of those optimists who
Yeah. You
believe
half full.
my glass is always half full, always half full. But Darius, here's something I want to ask you.
We'll ask him to answer that. I wonder what you would say to
That
your
was
point.
that's my opinion. Darius, you want to answer that?
Yeah, yeah. I wonder what he has to say to that.
No, I continue to be an optimist, but at times I have to bounce my head on the wall because you have to get real.
Take
Okay,
your,
and today is a day of me getting real.
yeah, I don't think so. I
Today is
don't
very
think
much a
so.
day of me
I don't
getting
think
real.
so.
But
Yeah.
Darius, here's something I want to ask you. Are there any countries that have redefined themselves
Mhm.
from being like a transshipment point or being drug, being having the drugs being the dominant business model? Are there any countries that have transformed themselves?
No,
So, Darius, you're really telling me we have no hope. Okay,
but
Okay,
other hope.
you know
we
what
have
the difference
this.
is? You know what's the
This
difference?
thing has been going on in Trinidad and Tobago since the decade of the second half of the 60s. We have done nothing. This is
That is what it is. That is
2024.
the reason.
This
Exactly.
is 2024. These people are not jokers.
No,
Do
they're not.
not
They're
do,
not.
don't dismiss them as being
No.
evil, ruthless, bad boys, kind of old talk. These
No.
people in it to
Mm.
get
To win it.
rich. To
Not
get
rich,
rich.
you have beyond. How much money you think it looked over? Because you know what I was going to say to what you said? What I would say is that I don't think it's going to be difficult to get rid of it, of the drug trade, but I think you can. I think me personally, I feel they had a impact program with Trigger. I think that Trigger 7 of last year or the year before. It was very, very successful. And what you want to do is disrupt the trade, not go after the people, the capos or whoever you want to call, because we have our local ones. It's not to go after them, but it's to disrupt the trade so it no longer is feasible or viable. You're losing too much product passing through here because they have put in too many obstacles to make it feasible. They're losing too much product. But I
So,
think the problem with Trinidad is that, like Mexico has a strong tourism trade. They have a strong tourism sector. They have other things to fall back on. The problem with Trinidad, and there's a bit of hubris on our part, a bit of being arrogant on our part, with the guy, and he's giving us good for that too, I have to say. I must give Dr. Ali a lot of pips because he's handling himself really good. He and Mia Mortley, I must say. I'm sorry, Dr. Rowley, but you see, Mia Mortley and Dr. Ali, they make me proud. to be a CARICOM person. But
Well, yeah.
they look at alternatives, and that is what Ali said. He said, we have land card done. We could have agriculture. They built a flour mill the other day. They have gold. They have so much. So does Mexico. You know what happened to Trinidad? Trinidad stuck on one thing, oil and gas, and every other
Don't
area.
worry. Guyana have something else too, you know.
What it has? You don't want to say anything wrong, eh?
All the old talk about the bacchanal, about the Essequibo and all kind of thing.
Arbitral award, yes.
You know who controls the Essequibo?
ExxonMobil.
No. From the second half of the 1990s to the first 5 years of the 21st century, you had at minimum 4 drug labs in the Essequibo region.
Oh my Lord.
That is who controls the Essequibo.
We do have drugs in I think, but I don't think that's a main. Now with the finding of natural gas in ExxonMobil, now with the finding of natural gas and oil and so on, I think that has overtaken. It has.
And they're still launching semi-submersibles loaded with cocaine from Guyana to Europe.
If they're making money still, why give it up?
Yes.
And so, Karen, I don't think that simply because they got natural gas now, that their involvement in drugs will change, because Trinidad went through 2 periods in which we had the oil economy popped up, and that didn't impact the drugs getting involved in the drugs. So it's I think that Darius is quite right. It's an entirely different economy with an entirely different model and a whole set of stakeholders who function in it simply for the outcome, which is the money that they can make.
Who are you talking about? Mexico?
I'm talking about Trinidad. The comment you made is that with Guyana now getting natural gas, the chances of it being involved in the oil and gas, in drugs, may decrease. And I'm saying to you that Trinidad has demonstrated that even if you are getting a lot of money from fossil fuel, which is what happened to us, it didn't deteriorate or bring down our involvement in drugs.
Right. But what I
trying
to say
the more wealth flows in the societies, the more dope flows out the society. It's transship. The more wealth that flows in the society, more dope flows.
Okay.
Like Miami of the 1980s.
What is dope build Miami?
Okay. Yeah, dope, they already say that. It's cocaine in Miami. That's what they say.
Do you think that there's any international do you think there's any international collaboration that we, Trinidad, could get involved in order to reduce this transshipment point that we are?
No, what is happening to us now is that no foreign power can come here and fix what is wrong with us here.
Yeah.
Why not?
And the politicians, especially from 2010 to now, have shown by their actions they don't really care about the problem.
All right, Darius, let me just read something for you. It's a report of the International Narcotics Control Strategy Report from the United States. And it says, cooperation between the United States and Trinidad and Tobago on drug trafficking and transnational crime was overall productive in 2021. The government of Trinidad and Tobago should continue to develop strategies to strengthen border security, include finalizing the deployment of multi-agency border security unit to improve narcotics detection and interdiction at official ports of entry. The government should also increase its efforts to combat public corruption that facilitates transnational crime, including utilizing its civil asset and unexplained wealth order of provisions.
All things that they should do and are not doing. Yes. Go ahead, Carol. Darius. All that they should do, which they are not doing.
When you read that narcotics control strategy report every year, it's the same hymn over and over. Because nothing is being done.
Darius.
And they have no intention of. They have no intention.
But you see,
I want one bit of optimism. Something we can do. What can citizens do?
What we all have to do now is to sit down and think deeply about what kind of politicians have we elected So, but you see, so
I'm one of them.
let me do with this economy thing. So, what we must understand is all the talk about the car and them buying and the new car and them on the road and thing. What we must understand about Trinidad and Tobago
Yes.
is that nobody does the research to measure, quantify, and publish
What?
the nature of inequality,
That
wealth, and
Gini
income
coefficient.
distribution in
That
this
is true.
country.
That is true. The
No,
last time they did that, because I went to CSO office and they were very nice. That's what you're talking about, the Gini coefficient, which
yes,
really looks at when you look at the GDP, the gross domestic product, and you say on average, everybody, if you took that money the country made for that year and divided it among the population of 1.4 million, each person would end up with 15,000 US on average. The reality is, if you use the Gini coefficient, which is a economic term and it's obviously very complex, but the objective is that it will show you at the end of the day that 80% of that GDP that you're talking about hands up in 2% of the population, while
yes,
20%, and there
yes,
is a way of finding it out because the CSO, because I have the data right here, the CSO, when you look at the employment data, they have the labor force participation rate, and then what they do is from at least up to they did it from 2016 to 2022, so they're lagging. That is true, but they put into different blocks persons who are working for for persons working for less than $500 a month. 2016 to 2022, persons working for 500 to 1,909, and they put it into various blocks. So you can use that data if you're an economist and work out from that. If you're using employment as people who are employed, you can use that as a starting point to see how many people in this country are working for less than $2,000 that cannot mine a parrot on a stick, and those who, that very small minority, who are working for more than $6,000 or $7,000. And that alone, without having the geo coefficient to help you, but they can work it out, because when I went to CSO, they told me they did do it until 1990. I said, so why y'all don't do
yes,
this more? They couldn't answer my question.
politics.
But I
So what is happening in this country is that we have it is deliberately avoided, and and those who are up at the university who get in mind by taxpayers' money ain't doing it either because they have to play the political game to keep their work. So what is happening is that this is a country where you're only going on what you feel. What you feel is reality. We don't measure.
but no, I just gave you measurements. I haven't.
No,
No.
I'm talking about. So, what we know in this country is that we have this rinky dink neo-colonial economic structure
Okay.
that has now suddenly turned neoliberal. And the biggest dose of neoliberalism that descended upon us was from 4010 to now. 2010, sorry, to now. That is the biggest dose of
And what do you mean by
neoliberalism.
that? I would like to know what you mean by that.
But neoliberalism is a
Uh-huh.
classic system
Uh-huh.
whereby you establish a financial order
Mm-hmm.
premised on financial market capitalism,
Mm-hmm.
whereby you have a specific position on what is a worker and what is not a worker, and what the state must do for that worker and what the worker must do for herself. So under neoliberalism, you divorce the state from intervening into the daily life of the worker. You literally seek to dismantle all the rights and obligations that the worker fought for over the years. You literally weaken the workers' movement. You literally give power unto the capitalists to the very detriment of the basic rights of the worker. Sounds familiar? And what happens is that you take the state out of your daily existence matrix. And that is what is going on in Trinidad. But the greatest thing about Trinidad is that Trinidad is not a post-industrial society. We were never even industrial. But you want to have neoliberal structure. So in Trinidad and Tobago, we have 4 conglomerates that dominate the import distribution sector of this country,
That is true.
burning up millions of US dollars in foreign exchange that they cannot and will never generate.
Very true.
So
That
they are parasites on the body politic.
is true.
And amongst those 4 conglomerates, when you do the field study, you will recognize that some of the most vicious neoliberal policies are being practiced by those conglomerates. So we have one now who speaks to the dead and goes to the white light.
Okay, Darius, I want to say, I support Darius. I just want to say this with regard to the point you just made. You just said use field studies. I look at data, and I looked at central bank data, and it is true that in 2015, I think our foreign exchange reserves was about 10 or a little over 10 billion. It is also true because the central bank publishes it on a monthly basis, so you could go right afterwards and check it. It is also true that in this last year, 2023, by the time it reached September, it had reached down to 6.8. By the time it reached December, it reached down to 6.5.
Mm-hmm.
By the time it reached January, it went down to 5.8.
Mm-hmm.
In a matter of about 10 years, our foreign exchange reserves have been cut in half. And when you add to that a lot of that foreign exchange represents borrowings, because remember, our minister has borrowed and borrowed and borrowed, issued a lot of bonds. Bonds are paid back in US dollars. When they lend us money, is because we need the US dollars. But when it's time to pay the interest rate and to pay back at the end of the borrowing period, you have to pay it in US dollars. Where are you getting it from? You know what they're getting it from? That foreign exchange reserves is really not I think, I don't want to call the name of the economist, but other economists have actually stated that when you take out the borrowing component outside of that foreign exchange, which is now down to 5 point something billion, in a matter of a few years, cut in half, and you take out what you have to pay back, as if you took out a loan from the bank, you'll end up with, they said, with 400 million in the foreign exchange.
Mm-hmm.
So this country, that is not field studies, that is data. So the country really is in trouble. And when you talked about, final point, when you talked about the energy sector, it is true. The prime minister has said it. It's not me saying, he said it too, right? 4.1 billion cubic feet we will make in a few years ago. That's what we need to be able to feed the energy and the downstream. We are producing, I don't want to say the wrong figure, but we're producing about half of that. He said it already. It isn't, and that's why they are relying on the dragging field, which look in real trouble, because Machado is not allowed to participate in the elections, right? And that is related to the Lauren and related to the Manatee and related to every source of natural gas that we want. And without going into any other detail, the world is awash with natural gas. Europe is awash with natural gas. They had a warm winter. They built up their inventory. They now have America exporting LNG to countries. You have Guyana over there. Trinidad is in real trouble.
So,
ladies and gentlemen, distinguished gentlemen, there are a lot of messages coming in, and there's someone who's trying to get on the program. Can I take this call?
Let us speak to Darius, yes.
Okay. Good afternoon, caller. Welcome.
Hello, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, my brother. We have little time, right? So
I am asking the question, if it is the position as the head of the African emancipation typically if there are elections. Because if the guy has lost his thing, then maybe if you need new, vibrant, and more energetic and visionary person to take over.
Okay, thank you. Okay, that's his comment.
No, the basic question he's asking is, do we need a more vibrant, a new, energetic person to take over the leadership?
We definitely need to change the
Do that.
leadership. I
But
mean,
we just not
there's no
seeing.
question. No, I mean that struck every country. And you look at any country, good or bad, that has done, whether it's Merkel in Germany, who has done extraordinarily well, whether it was Martin Luther King, they kill and they either kill or they jail leaders, because once you chop off the head, which is the leader, the movement will come to an end. So if you want change, you've got to get good leadership. And leadership in our country doesn't only mean the prime minister, but those who he surrounds himself with. There's no question in my mind that they do not have the country's interest at heart. And honestly, you have to take with a tablespoon of salt whatever they tell you.
Okay. You thank you very much. We have about 2 more minutes before we can bring this to an end. So
Darius, you finish it up. Oh,
please,
sorry.
So on the goodbye, if you want to understand clearly how there is one economy, and this one economy has embraced the illicit economy, go into the parallel market for Forex in Trinidad right now, and go into that market and dabble in it, and you will see wonders to behold.
All right, that's a good point. That's a good parting shot, Dennise. You got it shot, parting shot. It mightn't get it in Central Bank, but you can get it outside.
Outside is a big stony point.
And you're getting the amounts that you want delivered to your bank account in the United States of America.
Oh my God.
So what you were saying, Darius, is that our systems and structures have just collapsed.
Yes.
And collapsed to an extent that if you want foreign exchange and you go on the ground, you can get it delivered to your account outside of the country.
Yes.
Pay for it locally.
You pay for it locally in TT dollars. It is delivered to your account in the United States of America.
Yes.
Darius, if you know how that has me
You don't believe that?
confused.
Why?
No,
And
don't.
if you know, my sister, the millions of dollars that are leaving and have left Trinidad via that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is
Because
true.
people are paid in TT dollars, you know. You pay workers in TT dollars here, so they don't mind selling you the US dollars because they need TT dollars to keep up the front of whatever business they have in Trinidad.
Yes, all of the illicit front businesses burn TT. So they take some. You see, if we had the time, I would have done the math with you all to see what you buy a ton of cocaine for, what you sell it for, and the outrageous profit that you end up with net.
Yes.
In US dollars or euro.
Okay, and we're leaving now, and to protect Dennise and myself and David and the station, the comments of the
guest
speaker, very enjoyable, very animated, and I'm sure there's a lot that we can learn from it. Those are not necessarily the views of those who have listened. It may be the views of some of us, but I can't speak for everyone.
Everybody has always disavowed all knowledge of my actions. I'm accustomed to that.
Darius, how are you on the show? How are you on the show then?
You're the last.
Darius, thank you very much.
One of the comments on the message board here is saying we need a part 2.
I know, Darius, you're real good, but next time you can't. First of all, when you start talking, all that talk about neoliberalism, even I who educated, I'll have in trouble following that.
But I did a book on neoliberalism.
Yes,
You gotta
Darius.
have your
Darius.
other part two
I
later
went
on.
and I went and looked at all them books you had in an attempt to prepare for this and stoops because I didn't have enough time to read all of them.
No, well, you see, that is all I have to do when the day come.
But you're very good. You were wonderful. It was fantastic having you on, and I'm sure we will have you on another time. But,
Thank you.
Right, but we have to
you.
go. Thank you for taking our invitation.
Thank you very much.